Okay, so in case somebody's just tuning in now, Zalando is actually the largest fashion platform in Europe. To give you a little spiel, the business spiel, we have revenue over 3 billion euros per year and about more than 11,000 employees in Europe, 1,600 in tech. So that's comparing to 2004, which was the tech team was at that time about 600 people. So you can tell we've grown pretty rapidly since then. That was when we went public. So we're a publicly traded company, about 5,000 employees in Berlin, and about 19 million active customers. So with such a big tech team, we have. So I go back to last spring when, right after the company went public, we realized that the old way that we were developing, which was quite command and control, very monolithic, wasn't going to be able to sustain the kind of ambitious growth that we had in mind. And so we changed our tech management strategy to a more agile format. So we call this radical agility, and it takes from Daniel Pink's drive the concepts of autonomy, mastery, and purpose, and gives that to developers to be able to innovate, experiment, use whatever technologies they really believe will help them get the job done. And one of the results of this change was that our open source development exploded really. And by the end of last year, we had gone up from just a few repos on GitHub to more than 300. So this year we scaled back by taking a closer look at those repos and assessing them for their value, their innovation, their usefulness to us and to others. And now we're at a nice, healthy 138, I think, as of today. So that's, in a nutshell, our journey, the TLDR version.
Sure. And so this is the... So you were using open source internally, but the conversation shifted to that maybe we can get some value and maybe we can give back some value from open source. Was that something you were instrumental in, or are you just a participant in that?
So I showed up here in February 2015. Back in 2012, so the tech stack had originally been Magento, which is an open source e-commerce technology. So there's always been this nod to open source. It became more conscientious or intentional around 2010 when we shifted from Magento to a Java JVM based architecture, and we incorporated Postgres, which is open source for our database technologies, as well as Tomcat and Spring. And so that's when we started to embrace using open source technology in a more expansive way. We had a more diverse stack after that. And so there were some developers who started creating projects, especially around Postgres use. Also in Python, some of our internal tooling. There was one developer in particular who was very passionate about open source and started open sourcing Python tools on our public repo. But when we announced Radical Agility, we greatly expanded our use of different tools and technologies and became much more diverse. So that opened up many more opportunities for us to not only use, but give back to the technologies that we were taking advantage of to build our business.
Well, I definitely want to ask some more questions about this, but I also want to bring Raffaele on just to make sure you're both introduced early in the show. So Raffaele, what's your relationship to what we're talking about today?
Yeah, I joined a little bit later than Lauri in June 2015. And so at that point of time, the whole open source, let's say the real open source time at Zalando was really growing. So it was there was constantly chatting about contributing to open source and do things open source first. So with a very open mind regarding making the project reusable and useful to other people, and it was essentially a natural way to start working, and I joined what we call the Open Source Guild, which is our internal way of saying like interest groups around open source. in this case. And yeah, I started contributing more and more to open source, to our project and also to external projects. And then this just became the rational way of working. So really having a look at communities and I would say radically changing the way we approach software development in general.
Oh, so and I also noticed in particular you're about container technologies. I have a couple of clients that are both looking at that very strongly. I'm sure there's some specific questions I can ask you later, but what's your overall take on containers, or is that like the next platform as a service sort of that was all radical like 4 or 5 years ago. Now it's all containers. What can you tell me about that now that you're sort of in the trenches about that?
So we've been into containers since a long time. So Zalando's been into containers since a long time, in the sense that we've been using LXC containers before Docker was cool, and we have been using Docker in production since quite some time already. What I've been working on is essentially also introducing some more abstraction to it, like for example Kubernetes, and I previously worked also on Mesos, which are container orchestration technologies, and I think these are really good cases for open source. Especially the Kubernetes project is a great example of how a project can go really, really fast thanks to its community. We see already every day on the web like why Kubernetes is growing so fast, and it's not really only because of the companies behind it, but also especially because of the incredible impact of the community.